Since the dawn of the nuclear age of the 1940s, global stability has rested on a certain set of assumptions. Most of the world's nuclear capability was split between the US and Russia, and the umbrella of American protection meant that its allies didn't have to develop nukes of their own. That appears to be changing. President Trump has famously been less hawkish about standing up to Russia. Now the European Union is reportedly considering a nuclear deterrent of its own, and sharing France's weapons between member countries. The situation in Asia is even more unsettled. North Korea is fanatically pursuing its own arsenal of nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles. On Monday, it test-launched 4 of the rockets into the ocean, just 200 miles shy of Japan. And the American president has unconventional ideas about how Japan should prepare.
North Korea has nukes. Japan has a problem with that. I mean, they have a big problem with it. Maybe they would, in fact, be better off if they defend themselves from North Korea. Maybe we would be better off, including with nukes, yes.
All of this has experts worried about an era of renewed nuclear threat, from jittery states and rogue actors who might seize on the instability. Among those sounding the alarm is William Perry, who served as Secretary of Defense under President Clinton.
Bill Perry has spent most of his life watching the world prepare for nuclear war, and he thinks we aren't nearly as scared as we should be.
I think the professionals in the field have a pretty good understanding of the impact of the use of nuclear weapons, but the general public certainly does not, and many of our leaders do not.
Perry's 89 years old. He lectures at Stanford, launched an online seminar last year, and travels the world 2 or 3 months a year to talk about how close we've come to catastrophe and how close we still are. He often talks about his nightmare scenario, where a small amount of enriched uranium ends up in the hands of a terrorist group.
If they had maybe 40 kilograms, they could make an improvised nuclear bomb.
But what would be the consequences?
The consequences of a 15-kiloton bomb would be Hiroshima. And besides the 80,000, 100,000 casualties, the social, the political, and the economic consequences are just really hard to believe.
How realistic is this, though? Isn't this just some sci-fi fantasy fear?
I think of all of the nuclear catastrophes that could happen, this is the most probable. I would say it's probably an even chance this will happen sometime in the next 10 years.
So now the ball is in the court of Donald J. Trump. Yes, sir. Mr. Trump, you met with your Joint Chiefs of Staff in August and in early September. You had your generals at Camp David. They weren't talking about taxes. You don't use generals to talk about taxes. You were planning a war, sir. George W. Bush, after 9/11, said he was going to divide the Muslims against themselves. Now a 1,400-year dispute between Shia and Sunni is about to take into a war. President Trump went to Saudi Arabia and called 50 Sunni nations through the king of Saudi Arabia. And instead of inviting Muslims to sit with Muslims to find out what's the point of contention and bringing peace about, he took those Sunni nations, yes you did, Mr. Trump, and you aimed their anger against Tehran and the Shia nation.
Trump is also expected to give a speech on Sunday that calls on the Muslim world to unite against extremism and terror, after attending the inauguration of a new Saudi militant monitoring center.
We would like to have one single message that we are all united against extremism and terrorism. We have united stance, united efforts, and united message.
It's no surprise that Trump's stamp starts with business. The two countries signed military deals worth nearly $110 billion. It's the U.S. president's first stop on a 9-day trip. Next up, he heads to Israel for 2 days, starting on Monday.
Just recently, you sent much weaponry into the Middle East. You've sent missiles into the Middle East. You didn't send them. You would urge them to buy them. A war is brewing. President Trump, you just left Asia, and you carried with you to Asia 3 of your largest aircraft carriers with F-18, F-16, a nuclear sub in the water. You had an armada around Kim Jong-un. You went to talk, but you had firepower to aid your lexicon of language. Mr. President, you're going to have to deal with either the thought that's in your mind that will destroy America and her future, because once the trigger of war is pulled, it will escalate. Now, I'm going to tell you what my teacher told me. You have planned a war. Yes, sir. The war that you have planned, you and your generals, is to the Middle East. You want to use the Sunni at the prodding of Israel to attack Iran. Just like you did with my brother Gaddafi. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You laid back, leading from behind. You in Syria now. Boy, this is rough. And Mrs. Clinton, she encouraged you to give the go-ahead to kill Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi had come in out of the cold. Gaddafi gave up all his weapons of mass destruction. And Bush used to be so proud to say, Gaddafi got the message. He's come in. And then under Barack, Hillary Clinton imposed her will. And they murdered Muammar Gaddafi.
Tomorrow. Thanks.
Wow. Huh.
Unconfirmed.
Unconfirmed. Yeah.
Unconfirmed.
No.
What up?
Unconfirmed reports about Gaddafi being captured.
Really?
Unconfirmed. Yeah. We've had too many. We've had a bunch of those before. We've had, you know, have had him captured a couple of times.
Yeah.
And the killing of Muammar Gaddafi wrapped a ribbon around Kim Jong-un. Yes, sir. And it was given to you as a gift. You will never get North Korea to give up what she has as a trump card. That's over, Mr. Trump. Can you live with North Korea with nuclear weapons? I think you're going to have to. Even though you have war plans already to knock out North Korea, but China said, if you attack North Korea, we have to defend them. China is right. Allah don't love aggressors. He said, but if North Korea attacks you, America, we'll lay out of it. So you went there thinking that you making friends. Wrong. You didn't discuss with China his plans for war. You have laid out in the Pentagon how you can wipe the Chinese out. But you don't want China, not yet. And you don't want Kim Jong-un yet. But you're looking for a softer target and you think that's Iran. Wrong. Wrong. If you permit Israel to push Saudi and the Sunnis into war with the Shiites, I want to say this to the Muslim world. See, you are so blinded that you think with America's backing you can win. Wrong. You're a Muslim. If you got the backing of Allah, you can win. But you don't have that backing. Not as an aggressor. Pakistan is sitting there with nuclear weapons. I noticed, Mr. Trump, he didn't mention Pakistan. Although at the United Nations, you did mention Iran. You mentioned Venezuela. You mentioned Cuba. And you mentioned Kim Jong-un. You'd rather fight all of those three and leave Kim Jong-un alone. But guess what? Guess what they found in North Korea? $6 to $10 trillion in mineral wealth. And guess what they found in Afghanistan? They dropped the mother of all bombs in an empty space, letting us know that you got it and you will use it. But what did you uncover? You know that in Afghanistan, there's another 10 trillion in mineral wealth.
There's a new twist to the war in Afghanistan, and this time it's minerals. In the last month, Western media reported that Trump is eyeing the country's mineral resources, once estimated to be worth $1 trillion. But that business venture could be met with yet another bloody chapter. The Trump administration is crafting a new war strategy in Afghanistan, an audacious policy shift in the 16-year conflict. They're preparing to beef up its military presence in the country to reverse the worsening security and start winning again.
It's a very big decision for me. I took over a mess, and we're going to make it a lot less messy.
The plan includes sending about 4,000 US troops to an existing force of over 8,000. Their reason this time is to fight to win the war.
We're not winning in Afghanistan right now, and we will correct this as soon as possible.
But did the US ever win during their 16-year foray in Afghanistan? The military conflict has cost US taxpayers around $1 trillion since 2001, something the US media hasn't shied away from discussing.
So, Chris, they're looking at a big pot here in numbers and some substantial money we're spending there, aren't they?
In another article, in the August 3rd, 1973 issue of Muhammad Speaks, he talks about the end of the war. And he raises the question, what can we expect at the end of the war? Paradise or hell? See in the Bible Daniel 9:26 and 27, and it reads, "And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." This is like saying, do not expect healing ointment to be poured on the sore that the war has made, for you will not get healing ointment. Instead, you will get an even worse sore with trying to find a job. For the unemployed soldiers who are returning from the war zone, if they have a chance to return. This will be one of the worst headaches for the government that she has ever received. With unemployment mounting so fast, it will create revolution, and everybody will want to divide the government up into pieces, and every leader will want to grab a piece for his part to try to muster some kind of government patterned after his own way of thinking. This is going on right now as we speak. I just heard the other day that in California they want to break California up into 6 little states. Many states want to secede from the Union, and some are desirous of breaking apart within the states. Desolation, he writes. If we are going to suffer deprivation in a country that has been the pride of the nations, this will make it altogether worse, for everybody will be thinking about the way that they used to live and the freedom and the privileges that they used to have. And this will make anger rise up in the midst. What I'm trying to show you, Elijah Muhammad writes, is that the prophet Daniel cannot be wrong, because this desolation that is determined to be poured on the most desolate is aimed at the place in which we now live. Just remember that you cannot expect paradise here when such condition of desolation is headed towards America. And since we cannot make the prophet's words other than the truth, we expect this desolation, and we are receiving this desolation now. Poor black brothers and sisters, you're so conscious now. You're pulling down the Confederate flag, you know, because that was the flag of the South in their breakaway rebellion against the North. But that's history. Yes, sir. You don't feel their pain, and they sure don't feel yours. But do you know how many white folk in the South lost their homes, lost their farms, lost their lives in that war? So when you force them to take down the flag that represents their commitment to slavery, yes, and to the way of the South, you jump up and pull it down, and you don't think you're going to get a backlash from white people? Robert E. Lee is a great general. When America won the war with Japan, they sat down with the generals. First World War, they show respect, one general to another, one warrior to another. So now you want to take, okay, Robert, we don't like you, but get your statue out of here. So President Trump said, well, where's it going to end? Because the first 5 presidents were all slave owners. You're going to tear down the Jefferson Monument? You see how it's getting? So now white folk, as I said, when Mr. Trump was elected, the onion was being peeled back and white civility was no more. They're not acting by you like you think they should. They're angry. And they're killing us. And they know they have a genocidal plot against all black America, starting with Nixon and Kissinger. And Memorandum 200, go look it up. They want to cull the population of our planet by 2 billion people. This is not human. This is satanic. They've got their scientists in laboratories how to control your mind.
The move sparked protests, including this violent clash near the statue of Jefferson Davis, who served as president of the Confederacy.
Loser, commie, pot smoking.
As the city plans to remove the remaining monuments, tensions are high. The New Orleans Police Department confirms multiple threats have been made toward contractors hired by the city to take down the statues.
Move.
Armed militias reportedly on the rise, driven by xenophobia and racism, but also by fear of government itself.
I think what the government gives, the government can take away.
Even for those not driven to pick up arms, the anger seems palpable in America.
By show of hands, how many of you would say that you're mad as hell about all the stuff that's going on? It's almost all of you.
The examples of regular citizens lashing out at each other fill our news feeds every day.
That's not how we drive in America. Trump's supporting your illegal cousins today.
The way to hasten such desolation is to confuse the heads of government. And if we see this confusion of the heads of government as plain as the 5 fingers on our hand, and if we have only 1 finger on our hand, we can see that this government is confused.
Germany is totally controlled by Russia.
The president's scathing critique of Germany made diplomats cringe, but no more so than his own team. Watch U.S. Ambassador to NATO Kay Bailey Hutchinson look away from her NATO counterpart, squirming. You can see Chief of Staff John Kelly look away from the president and pucker his mouth. And the president renewed the attack using the word captive.
Captive to Russia. Because
some turned their heads, some fidgeted.
It's a confused time of the governments of which the citizens look to for guidance. This is not just in America. This is in England. This is in France. This is in Italy and Germany and Russia. This confusion is going on throughout our planet because this is the end of your time to rule. This is the end of wickedness and the wicked rulers of our planet. How can the head guide if it is not at peace with itself? Everybody regrets talking about the woe that is in America. But Elijah Muhammad writes, America brought this woe upon herself by not doing justice to her black slaves. Allah God wants to pay America for her injustice to her lowly black slave. Allah God is not bringing this woe on America because of her injustice to nations outside of America. He's paying America for her injustice to us, the poor black man and woman in America. Remember the words of Thomas Jefferson. I fear for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. And George Washington said, I fear that too many years that pass over our heads, this slave will be a very troublesome species of property. Elijah Muhammad continues in his writing, America has not received much woe yet for how she killed outright poor black man in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, other parts of America. America has hated her black slave worse than she hates rattlesnakes. America has given the black man every evil and indecent name that she could think of, while yet her black slave has been her safety ground. America does not want to admit to her trouble, for her black slave is still here. But there will be no jobs for anybody. Oh, this is coming.
Well, staggering new figures reveal the extent of the damage to the world's biggest economy by the coronavirus shutdown. In just 1 week, another 6.6 million people filed for unemployment benefits. Well, that means nearly 17 million Americans have lost their jobs in the past 3 weeks. That's around 1 in 10 workers.
One calamity after another befalling America. And when she thinks that one calamity is going out, another is just entering. These constant calamities will continue until America is on her hands and knees admitting that God is the greatest. Remember the words of the scripture, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Not the prophet Jesus of 2,000 years ago, but that one that would rise from us in the last days and be taken up into the wheel with the great Mahdi. Yes, every prophecy of prophets prophesying of destruction is aimed at America. This dreadful and awful trouble that is divinely focused at America, I say to you, my black brothers and sisters, seek refuge in Allah. Fly to Allah and come and follow me to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the God that he represents. The end of the war, desolations are determined. Remember this. Keep waiting with your disbelief and doubt, and you shall soon come to know that what Elijah Muhammad has said to you and written in his articles and books to us is most certainly the truth.
On February 24th, 2013, during his Savior's Day address, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan introduced Muhammad's economic blueprint to end poverty and want.
7 days times 1 nickel a day, 35 cents a week. Do you have it? Yes, sir. Isn't that painless? Yes, sir. You know you don't like pain. Yes, look at this. 52 weeks in a year, so that amounts to 18 $18.20 per year. And if everybody in this room, everybody listening by television, everybody under the sound of my voice gave $18.20 a year, multiply that by 16 million in the working force. Now we got $291,200,000 in just 1 year. 291 million. Look at the power of pennies, nickels, and dimes if all of us did this. Can you see the picture? Look, we want to do exactly as Isaiah the prophet said. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations.
With your support of Muhammad's economic blueprint, we can obtain farmland, build industry, and create jobs for our people. Through pooling our nickels, dimes, and dollars, we can rebuild the wasted cities and provide a future for our children. To support Muhammad's economic blueprint, go to economicblueprint.org and register now.
Are you in agreement with what we must do to end our poverty and want by accepting a program to put our nickels, dimes, and dollars together and make them work for us as a people? How many of you are in agreement? Would you just raise your hands?